I woke up that morning with a cold sweat on my forehead and the sound of silence that felt heavier than a storm. My name is Bill. I am 57 years old, a man who built an empire of steel, glass, and numbers. And yet, in that very moment, I felt like a prisoner inside my own mansion. The wheels of my chair made a soft squeak as I pushed myself across the marble floor, the golden light of the sunrise crawling slowly over the polished surface like a thief trying not to be noticed. Avia, my wife, 25, beautiful, delicate, with a smile that could sell trust to the most skeptical soul, was nowhere to be found. Again, nights had become her territory, full of vanished calls, hidden messages, whispers in the hallway that died when I entered the room. I wanted to believe in the love story I once bought with expensive gifts and promises of comfort, but the numbers never lie, and my bank account had been breathing like a hunted animal lately, withdrawals and transfers disappearing like birds before a storm. Michael. That name had appeared in my private investigator's report 3 times, a shadow behind her perfect frame, a man with eyes like a fox and hands that played with danger. They thought I was weak, crippled, a relic of a man waiting for time to take the last piece of dignity I had left. But I had been playing games with sharks before they even learned how to swim. That morning I stared at my reflection in the cold glass of the window and whispered, "Today, we start." I opened the hidden drawer under my desk, the one no one knew existed, and pulled out a thin folder black leather. Inside it contracts, recordings, bank statements, enough to build a wall of truth so high it would crush both of them under its weight. I could hear the soft hum of the house waking up, servants moving like silent ghosts, the smell of coffee sneaking into my room like a guilty secret. I reached for my phone, sent a single message to a man who owed me more than his freedom. "Tonight. Prepare everything. No delays." He replied within seconds. "Understood." The plan was not born that day. It had been growing like a snake in the dark corners of my mind for weeks. I would let them believe they were winning, that my health was fatting, that the will was almost ready to sign. I would invite them, the entire greedy circle, to a farewell dinner, a night of fake tears and crocodile smiles. And then, when the lights were brightest and their hands were closest to the gold, I would rise not just from the chair but from the grave they had dug for me. I rolled into the corridor, the paintings of ancestors watching me like silent judges. The air smelled like dust and old lies. In the kitchen, Avia finally appeared, silk robe, hair still wet, eyes pretending innocence. "You're awake early," she said, her voice smooth, sugar melting over a knife. "Couldn't sleep," I answered, letting my gaze cut through her like a scalpel. "Long night," she smiled, that rehearsed, perfect smile. "Just couldn't fall asleep," she lied without blinking. I nodded, playing the fool she wanted me to be. Inside, every nerve in my body screamed. I wanted to shout, to expose her, to throw Michael's name in her face, but no, not yet. A predator doesn't roar before it strikes. It waits, it breathes, it calculates. That night I would make the first move. The invitations had already been sent, a gathering of closest friends and family, a celebration of legacy. They thought it was a prelude to my will. They had no idea it was a stage for their destruction. I wheeled myself back to my study, closed the door, and opened the encrypted drive on my computer. Videos, photos, messages, Avia and Michael. Their whispers about the accident they planned, the brake failure, the staged fall from the balcony. The fake doctor who would sign the death certificate with a trembling hand for the right price. I watched them one by one, not with sadness anymore, but with a growing fire that felt almost young again. Betrayal does not just wound, it fuels. It builds a new spine where bones have failed. I wrote one last note, placed it in the inner pocket of my jacket. To those who thought I was done. The clock ticked like a heartbeat. Sunset was still far away, but I could already taste the air of the evening when masks would fall, and the game would truly begin. The day moved slowly, like a snake in the grass, every hour another turn in the trap I was building. I spent the morning signing fake documents, the kind that would make Avia believe I was finally surrendering control, the kind that would make Michael feel safe enough to step out of the shadows. My lawyer, an old fox with scars hidden behind a polite smile, played his role perfectly. "Are you sure about this, Bill?" he asked, his pen hovering over the fake signature line. "Absolutely," I said, letting my voice tremble just enough to look believable. "It's time to let go." But inside, the gears were turning faster than ever. I instructed the staff to decorate the main hall with golden candles and white flowers, a scene so peaceful it would lull even the sharpest predator into comfort. Avia floated through the house in a new dress, pretending to care, her phone buzzing like a nervous insect in her hand. I saw the message pop on the screen when she thought I wasn't watching. "Tonight, be ready." It was from Michael. I smiled, a quiet predator's smile. Let them be ready. Let them prepare their mask of grief, their fake toast, their whispered promises of inheritance. The storm was already forming behind the walls they thought they owned. In the afternoon, I went to the balcony, the one they had once whispered about sabotaging. The railing was fixed now, reinforced with steel stronger than their loyalty. From there I could see the city stretching out like a web of glass and greed, every skyscraper a mirror of my past mistakes and victories. I remembered the first time I saw Avia, bright eyes, nervous laughter, a hand that held mine like it meant something. I had been lonely then, powerful but hollow, a man craving connection more than he cared about truth, and she played her role perfectly. Dinner time came like a silent drum. Guests started to arrive, cousins with false smiles, old business partners with cold eyes, neighbors dressed like saints. They shook my hand, they whispered, "Stay strong." They looked at the chair as if it was already a coffin. Avia walked by my side, her arm gently resting on my shoulder, a picture of the devoted wife, her perfume like a trap, sweet and suffocating. Michael arrived last. He thought he was invisible, dressed in dark, eyes scanning the hall like a thief searching for unlocked doors. I greeted him with the same calmness I used when I bought my first company, polite, deadly. "Michael," I said, "glad you could make it." He nodded, his fake respect as thin as the air before a storm. The dinner began. Toasts were made. They clinked glasses to my health, to my future, to the legacy they planned to divide like vultures around a dying lion. I let them. I played my part, the weak man, the broken body, the soft voice thanking them for their concern. But under the table, my hand pressed a small button on the recorder in my pocket. Every word they said, every hint of their greed was being captured, collected, loaded into the weapon I would fire before the night was over. Dessert was served. Candles flickered. And then, like a ghost through the door, Michael's patience cracked. He whispered something to Avia, too close, too soft, forgetting the eyes around them. I saw her hand squeeze his under the table. I saw the hunger in his stare. And I knew it was time to let the mask slip just a little. "You know," I said, raising my glass, "life is strange. You build a world, and sometimes the ones closest to you are the ones holding the knife." The hall went silent. Avia froze. Michael coughed. Someone laughed nervously. "What do you mean, darling?" she asked, her voice too sweet, too controlled. I smiled. "Oh, nothing, just an observation." I rolled back slightly, the chair creaking like a warning. "But tonight we celebrate, don't we?" They relaxed again, too easily. They always do when they think the prey is still bleeding. But I was not bleeding. I was sharpening my teeth. Midnight was near, and with it, the storm that would rewrite every face in that room. The clock struck midnight, and the air in the mansion turned heavy, like the pause before thunder. I could feel the weight of their stares, each one waiting for the moment I would stumble, collapse, surrender. Avia whispered something to Michael, her lips barely moving, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her glass. They thought I was fadding, a dying man clinging to ceremony. But my mind was sharp, sharper than the silver knife resting next to my untouched dessert. I let the silence stretch, a rope tightening around their schemes. "Bill, are you all right?" Avia asked, her tone dripping with rehearsed concern. "Of course," I said, my smile calm as the ocean before a storm. "In fact, I've been thinking about tonight for a long time." Chairs shifted. Glasses trembled. Michael's eyes darted to the hallway where his bag was hidden, the one with fake documents, forged transfers, the key to the vault they planned to drain. I had seen it hours ago. I had marked it with invisible ink. They had no idea every step they took was already written in my plan. I raised my glass again, this time not for a toast, but to study their faces. Avia's mask was flawless to anyone else. She looked like a loving wife, but I saw the flicker of fear. Michael's jaw was tight, his knuckles white around the fork. "Do you know what I hate most?" I said softly. When people mistake kindness for weakness. The hall went quiet. Someone dropped a spoon. In that silence, I pressed another button under the table. The lights dimmed, the giant screen behind me flickered, and suddenly the room was filled with images, photographs, messages, recordings. Avia's late-night calls, Michael's bank transfers, plans whispered in corners when they thought the cameras were off, gasps echoed. One cousin muttered a curse. Avia shot up from her chair, her voice breaking. "Bill, what is this? How dare you invade my privacy?" Privacy. Laughed not loud but sharp enough to cut through the room. "This is my house, my blood, my life. And you planned to steal it, didn't you?" Michael stood too, his voice shaking with forced calm. "You're imagining things, old man. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." Old man, that was the spark. I stood, slowly, painfully, like a statue remembering it could still move. "Do you think I don't know?" I whispered. "Do you think this chair made me blind? I saw everything. The pills you switched, the lawyers you bribed, the papers you forged while I pretended to sleep." The guests shifted, their smiles gone, their greed turning to fear. One aunt whispered, "Is this true?" Another backed toward the door. The hall was no longer a celebration, it was a trap, and they were caught. Avia tried to speak again, tears now sliding down her perfect makeup. "Bill, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, cutting her words like a blade. "You wanted a funeral. Tonight you get a trial." I clapped my hands once. The doors opened. My lawyer stepped in, followed by two security men carrying black briefcases. They placed them on the table, clicked them open, and revealed documents, recordings, and a contract with every name that had betrayed me. Gasps again. One child started crying. Michael lunged forward, but the guards blocked him. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You're finished. Everyone knows you're dying." I smiled, cold and bright. "Everyone thinks I am. That was the point." The room spun with whispers. Avia clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her voice now a whisper. "What are you going to do?" I leaned closer, the candlelight painting my face with shadows. "What I should have done the moment I saw through you. But don't worry, my dear, it won't be quick." The clock struck 12:15. The guests were no longer guests. They were witnesses, and this was no longer a dinner. It was the opening act of their downfall. The night tasted like iron and smoke as the last glass shattered on the marble floor. I stayed standing while everyone else sank into their seats, their earlier confidence now twisted into confusion and fear. Avia avoided my eyes, her hands trembling near her lap. Michael, however, tried to regain control, his voice rising like a cornered animal. "This is madness, Bill. You're sick, and they will see through this circus." I let his words slide off me like rain on glass. For years I allowed their whispers, their fake smiles, their carefully staged pity to dance around me. Tonight the music stopped. I turned to the lawyer who stood silently by the screen. "Begin." A click, a flash, and the walls came alive with documents signed, forged, manipulated. Every transfer, every secret meeting, every fake medical report that claimed I had only weeks to live. The crowd gasped again, the sound like dry leaves in the wind. "You lied to me," I said, my voice calm but heavy as stone. "You told the world I was dying so you could dig my grave while I was still breathing." Avia's lips parted, tears glistening but not falling. "Bill, I thought. You thought wealth meant weakness." I cut her off, my eyes never leaving hers. "You thought marrying me was a ticket, not a bond." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "You're bluffing, these are fakes." I took a step forward, the cane in my hand tapping the floor like a countdown. "Then sue me," I whispered. "But the authorities are already watching this live." His face drained of color. Avia's ringed fingers tightened around her glass. I pressed the second switch. The doors locked with a metallic thud. No one in, no one out. The lawyer handed me a folder thicker than a Bible. Inside, testimonies, photos, signatures. Proof that the very people sharing this table had planned my death, or at least my disappearance, for money, inheritance, freedom. "I invited you here," I said, "not to celebrate but to witness the price of betrayal." One guest stood up, my so-called cousin, and stammered, "Bill, please think of the family." "We didn't know," I laughed, the sound dry as old wood. "Family," my voice echoed against the crystal. "Family is loyalty, and tonight you sold yours cheap." The lights flickered, not from power but from fear. Avia finally stood, her chair screeching across the floor. "What do you want from us?" she whispered. "Forgiveness." I stepped closer until her perfume turned sour in my breath. "No," I said. I want you to feel the nights I spent believing your lies. The hours I lost while you planned your new life without me. I want your sleep to turn to ash. I motioned to the guards. They brought in 3 black envelopes, each sealed with my crest. One for Avia, one for Michael, one for the rest. Inside, I said, is your future. Read it carefully. It tells you exactly what will happen tomorrow. Michael grabbed his, tore it open, and his face crumpled. You can't seize everything. The company, the accounts. They were never yours, I said coldly. They returned to the one who built them, me. Avia's hand shook as she opened hers. Her eyes widened, lips trembling. You're exiling me. No, I corrected. You are free to leave, but you leave with nothing. Not a dress, not a dollar, not even the name you borrowed. The hall was now silent except for the rain starting to hit the windows, soft, then harder, as if the sky itself approved the sentence. Guests began to whisper prayers or curses under their breath. The guards unlocked only one door, the back, the cold one. You have until dawn, I said, to vanish from my world. If you stay, the law will greet you first. Avia's tears finally fell. Michael cursed, low and venomous. I turned away, my reflection in the glass now taller, stronger, more alive than it had been in years. Tonight was only the beginning. Revenge was no longer a word. It was breathing. The dawn bled across the horizon like a wound that refused to close. I sat by the massive window of my study, cane resting across my knees, the scent of wet asphalt rising from the empty driveway below. Hours had passed since the banquet ended. One by one, they fled through the cold door, clutching their black envelopes as if they carried their own death sentences. Avia was the last to leave. I watched her silhouette disappear into the mist, heels sinking in the gravel, her one sweet perfume lingering like a ghost that overstayed its welcome. Michael didn't leave quietly. He cursed the walls, kicked the gates, threatened lawsuits and headlines. But the moment he stepped outside, his phone froze, his accounts locked, his empire crumbling in real time. I had prepared every trigger, every wire, every silent partner waiting for my signal. The city woke up to news it never expected. Business magnate declares betrayal war, the headlines screamed. I didn't hide anymore. My face was on every channel, not as the frail cripple they painted me to be, but as the man who refused to die quietly. Avia tried calling. I let it ring. 27 times, then silence. By noon she was gone, no trace, no cards, no allies. Her youth had been her weapon, and now it was her cage. Michael, desperate, arrived at my gates again by evening, this time with lawyers and cameras. He shouted for mercy, but I opened the gates not to greet him, to let the press see the man stripped bare. His fake deals, his forged documents, the audio of his plotting with Avia, all of it was released at once. A storm of clicks and flashes drowned his last excuses. You ruined me, he screamed across the courtyard. I stepped forward, the cane tapping like a gavel. No, Michael. You ruined yourself when you treated loyalty as a wallet. The cameras loved that line. It became a headline within the hour. The world began to turn slowly back toward me. Not out of love, I never asked for love, but out of respect and fear. The betrayal that nearly buried me became the fire that rebuilt my empire. That night I walked, not wheeled, not carried through the halls they once planned to inherit. The marble echoed with my steps alone. For the first time in years, my legs didn't tremble, not because the illness vanished, but because the weight on my chest had lifted. Avia sent one last message before disappearing into silence. Bill, I never loved you, but I never wanted it to end like this. I stared at the words for a long time, then deleted them without reply. Some ghosts are better unfed. Michael, the last I heard, he fled the country under an alias, debts snapping at his heels like hounds. And me. I didn't rebuild what was lost, I reinvented it. New partners, new walls, new locks, but I kept the table. That cursed table where the betrayal unfolded. I kept it as a reminder. Wealth attracts shadows, but shadows only win if you keep the lights off. Tonight, as the city sleeps, I pour myself a drink. The liquid burns like truth. I don't toast victory. I don't toast revenge. I toast clarity, the kind that costs everything and pays back more than money ever could. The storm has passed, but the scars, they stay. They always do. And when someone new asks me why I live alone in a house that echoes with secrets, I tell them, because silence is the only loyal guest left.